You're watching the People's Television, ABC Amber TV, the voice of Ambazonia. Stay tuned. You're watching the People's Television, ABC Amber TV, the voice of Ambazonia. Stay tuned. You're watching the People's Television, ABC Amber TV, the voice of Ambazonia. Stay tuned. You're watching the People's Television, ABC Amber TV, the voice of Ambazonia. Stay tuned.
Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, fellow Ambazonians, friends and sympathizers, wherever you are all over the world. I greet you again this very day, Friday. You are watching your ABC TV. I would just want to let you know that this is an indication that your interim government under Dr. Samuel Ikomesako will never let you go thirsty nor hungry. What you're about to watch now is a program that was supposed to have taken place on Sunday, the State of the Liberation Movement, which is usually hosted or covered, presented, discussed by no other than our able Secretary of State for Communication, Dr. Mungwa, PhD, AFASEF. He's been doing a marvelous job. If you're just joining, watching through Facebook, watching through YouTube, or via satellite on Ground One, Homefront, or wherever, please do share. Share and invite fellow Ambazonians. Invite friends of other nations. Share the link and let them get connected to know what is happening in Ambazonia, because there is no other person that will tell our story better than us. We are to go out there, say the things as they are. Say it before somebody tells you what you are supposed to be saying for yourself. Dish out the food to your visitors. Don't let the visitors take what they do not know. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Ambazonians, once again you are welcome, and in a few seconds you will be having Dr. Mungwa, our able Secretary of State for Communications, joining me live here to do what he knows how to do best, knowing where to touch fellow Ambazonians, knowing how to present what it should and how it should be presented. We compel you, as I said before, do share. This is the state of the liberation struggle. What is going on? What is happening? How many miles? What have we done within the week? What has happened? What is it that you are supposed to hear from your interim government? From the house where nothing is left out to be told. What the people want to know from their own government. This is the platform and this is the time. Dr. Mungwa, technical crew, if you are there, please.
You're watching the People's Television, ABC Amber TV, the voice of Ambazonia. Stay tuned.
Global greetings to all Ambazonians. Today, Friday, July the 8th, I come to you to talk to you about the state of our revolution. First of all, 21 gun salute to all our restoration forces. I'm going to talk about a number of topics today. First, I'm going to talk about the government position. And this week, I'm going to pull from our archives something that happened in the past so that I can discuss it with you. And thereafter, I hope the anchor lady will project, I think, 2 or 3 videos. And I'm going to use that as the platform on which to start today's discussion. Now I'm going to talk about decision 266/03, the Banjul disgrace. Okay, my dear and distinguished people of the British Southern Cameroons, under the blue and white stripes of Ambazonia, I salute you for your realism, fortitude, and courage. I also want to send a message to the killer occupier and lawless regime of Paul Biya in Yaoundé that the bond between the Ambazonian home front and its diaspora on this planet Earth is created and kept alive by the Almighty God in a holy realm. All efforts by La République du Cameroun to break up that holy bond as part of his strategy to continue subjugating our people in the home front exist only in the human realm with Satan. God's realm is superior. No man is able to rupture that relationship, that bond between the home front, anywhere, and its diaspora. The two, meaning home front and diaspora, are sanctioned by the Creator to work together. To every man, woman, and child of Ambazonia, I want you to know that your blood is our blood in the diaspora. Your heartache is our heartache in the diaspora. Your assimilation pains are our assimilation pains in the diaspora. And your hopes for a sovereign and free Ambazonia in the Commonwealth of civilized nations is what we are all fighting to achieve. May the Almighty God help us. I can tell you one thing, fellow Ambazonians in the home front and the diaspora. Peace and justice reign on earth under the banner of the United Nations. There is no law of the United Nations suggesting that a separate people, formerly in an autonomous federated state, such as Ambazonia, must live in a failed federation, must accept subjugation from French Cameroon in bizarre circumstances under which France confiscates 50% of the revenue on sales of Ambazonian products in the international market. All our products comprising cocoa and coffee beans, bananas, timber, tea, gold from Bafaka in Dian County, and as well as petroleum from offshore Dian County, have become money makers for France. France seizes 50% of our income, despite absence of any treaty between France and the people of Amazonia. This is colonial exploitation at its worst point, and a sufficient cause to declare war against France. The evil of France and its proxy, La République du Cameroon, is evident in more than 200 villages or settlements that have been burned down, not to capture Ambazonian self-defense soldiers, but purely to render the population homeless. Hospitals and markets burned down, not to capture Ambazonian self-defense soldiers, but to kill the sick and wipe out the Ambazonian economy. And genocide, evidenced by mass graves in Ambazonia, all in efforts to overturn, through blistering violence, a vote of the UN on the 21st of April, 1961, which ushered in a Cameroon's federation and not a unitary state under France. I also want to awaken every intellectual, every man, woman, and child in Ambazonia who can read to look up decision 266 stroke 03 of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights on the Internet. This is an important decision by the highest legal body in Africa. Its opinions have legal weight in the world court system. Decision 266 stroke 03 was decided on May 27, 2009 by the African Commission in response to a landmark complaint by Dr. Kevin Gumne, may his soul rest in peace, and 14 fellow Ambazonians of the last generation of our fathers. The complaint focused on issues of marginalization and assimilation in the failed Cameroon's federation, as well as solutions to a re-federation of the two Cameroons. French Cameroon clearly ignored the ruling in the mistaken belief that she had the monopoly to orchestrate state violence in a genocidal war of occupation. The arguments and counter-arguments in that complaint betrayed the sinister intent of Yaoundé. It is notable that Dr. Maurice Kamto, who argued on behalf of French Cameroon, claimed to the African Commission that Ambazonians, or the people of the former British Southern Cameroons, are not a separate people. Dr. Kamto claimed that the people of Ambazonian highlands are part of the Bamilekes of French Cameroon, and that those of the Ambazonian lowlands are of the Sawa origins in French Cameroon. Well, fellow Ambazonians, Mr. Maurice Kamto did not prevail. Kamto lost the argument. The African Commission pointed out that the people of British Southern Cameroons are indeed a people under the United Nations system by virtue of a common and separate colonial heritage from La République du Cameroon. A people under the UN Charter, fellow Ambazonians, have an inalienable right, which, upon activation, entitles them to self-determination as a sovereign entity with the right to economic development. The idea of domination, which is central to French Cameroon's designs in Ambazonia, is expressly condemned in the United Nations Decolonization Resolution 1514 or 1514. French Cameroon's loss on this central argument of inevitable nationhood from Ambazonia parallels other loss in their history, notably a defeat at the United Nations on April 21st, 1961, when Cameroon and France opposed the independence of Southern Cameroon as a separate federal state in the United Nations designated Cameroon's Federation. This was a vote and the killer occupiers lost. Now, they have shown their capacity to use blistering violence in efforts to overturn the April 21st, 1961 vote. We, the indigenous people of Ambazonia, solemnly pledge our loyalty to the fight of the recolonization of our country, Ambazonia, by the axis of evil represented by France and French Cameroon under our freedom, until our freedom becomes reality. Long live Ambazonia and short live the struggle. Over to you, Anchor Lady.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mungwa, for another explicit explanation and revealing facts to the Ambazonian people. Actually, it is something that everyone is supposed to know, because many people are left behind not understanding. When you say the Banjul disgrace, I was just thinking, I said, is it a new Banjul disgrace? Is it the old Banjul disgrace? What is really behind? What was it that was really said in what really happened in Banjul? You have
Yes.
explained
I would,
what
I would
really
like
happened.
to.
What was that fine thing that happened?
Okay, so we took Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia, took La République du Cameroun. On the site of Ambazonia was headed by the late Dr. Ngumne, and on the site of La République was headed by the renowned Francophone professor, Professor Maurice Kamto, whom we've heard over and over again as probably the smartest lawyer, if not in La République, probably in Francophone Africa. And this case was based on marginalization and the total ignorance of La République, of the fact that we're Class B entities and we had independence at the same time. However, La République, in a failed federation, La République decided to literally to take us captive. And they felt that this should be taken to the court. And the highest court in Africa is actually based in Banjul. And that's the highest court in Africa. So we took the case to Banjul. And the only argument that Professor Kanto had was that the Northwest, or the so-called Northwest, was actually part of Bamileke land, and the Southwest was part of Bassa land. And of course, the court did not agree. That was true. We had a distinct heritage from the British, and we had a right to self-determination. In an extension, the court was very open to probably assist La République to make sure that this problem was resolved in an amicable way. Of course, you know La République, they never listen to anybody. Obviously, with advice from France, they said they kicked out the idea with the intention that if we ever tried to show any signs of trying to regain our sovereignty, they would declare war against us. And indeed, it happened. And we all know what happened in 2000, December, I think, or November 2017. Biya, on the tarmac from a trip to Senegal, declared war against us. And we have been in war ever since. We know, again, that even prior to that, when Mitterrand visited Cameroon, uh, I think the late 80s, so I think late 80s, he made it very clear that no Ambazonian should be allowed to be president of the country, and any effort to have any sort of independence or go back to a federation should be, the response should be military. And that's what La République has always believed in, that the only way to, to be one Cameroon or ignore any international opinion as to the state of Ambazonia can only be answered in a military, can only have a military response. But what I really wanted to talk today for us to get a broad message, because one of the things that the government or members of the cabinet come on television is to make the Ambazonian people understand, why are we living? Why are we living? There are many reasons why. And we have to educate those who think that this fight, it is something that it is not it is not a war of personality. It is not about personality here. We have a problem that confronts every Ambazonian. It doesn't matter what you are, whether you are so-called minister or whether you are a professor, whether you are a lady or a woman in the village, whoever you are, there are fundamental issues that we do not accept. And I'm here every day to give you real examples of what have happened in the past, so that you can see what is going on and what are the solutions that we have. So I would like you to show, at least one at a time, the video on the failed bridge somewhere in La République. Please, can you show that? Then I can talk about it. Okay, thank you. Welcome back. Now, let me tell you a story about, I think, 1997, 1998. There was a vacancy at the School of Public Works in Yaoundé, what they call École Nationale de Travaux Publics in Yaoundé. They were looking for a director to lead that institution. And if you listen to one of my past presentations, for a while, I was actually a lecturer in that institution. And I actually taught them bridge design. So when this opportunity came up, and I understood that these technicians are trained by the government and sent to the various departments or various provinces to take care of roads and other road infrastructures, I thought to myself that maybe this will be an opportunity for me to make an impact in that institution. Besides, many people do not know this. While I was doing my master's degree in structural engineering at the University of Surrey, part of our homework was actually to inspect the bridges around Guildford and to write a report on these bridges. And possibly, if there are any issues, we should actually propose solutions. I found that as one of the most exciting part of my course. So when I came back to Cameroon, I said, oh my goodness, if I'm given the opportunity, I can make an impact. Now, at that time, the Minister of Public Works was Mr. Jerome Eta, somebody I personally respected for his knowledge of engineering, especially being our president of the Cameroon Society of Engineers, somebody I've encountered in many meetings, and I believe that we're very good and close friends. So when this position came up, I think he himself asked me, why don't you apply to be director of the School of Public Works? I was so excited. Not only did I apply, I was hoping that before they select a candidate, they will call them and interview them and probably ask them, what future do you have for these institutions? What changes can you make? What do you think you can do in order to improve on the education of these young engineers or young technicians? 5 of us were selected, but to my greatest dismay, they selected a gentleman who is a chemical engineer. And he was made a director. I happened to be somebody who hails from the same village or the same province or definitely the same village of Mr. Jerome. So it occurred to me that, in fact, or reminded me that this is what La République politics is all about. It's all about tribalism. It's all about clientelism. It's all about transactional politics. I was extremely angry. And I said to myself, all these ideas I've had about bridge maintenance and constructing new bridges and so on and so forth, all that I had to throw it away because I never had the occasion to tell Mr. Jerome Eta exactly what I had. And this strikes at the heart of the problems we are having. This is the reason why we don't want a country where you bring in people who are not competent to do a job. And if you look in this particular situation, because I'm still going to come down the line, why that bridge comes into the picture. Remember, it's almost 25 years, if not more, since that position was opened and filled by this gentleman. And I said to myself, it comes back to the same story about people being managers and not leaders. And in a country where the president is a manager, all the ministers are managers, you realize that it is almost impossible to be creative, to solve practical and local problems. And that's why most of the work that we do is simply to help a foreign country improve industrially. So you have a chemical engineer, now head of a civil engineering institution. Well, he may build new buildings, he may hire new teachers, but what is the vision? The vision has to come from the top. This is what we are saying it cannot work. Okay. let's go back to the beginning of the story. This is exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that all the students who graduate from that institution, who are sent to the provinces, one of the assignments I would want to give them is to identify all the bridges that they have. And with the help of the courses that I will give them, they should be able to have a checklist. This checklist will help them identify different types of faults that you can find in a bridge and classify them in such a way that if one is unsafe, it needs immediate attention. Now you can bring in engineers, and that's why I've thought the Cameroon Society of Engineers will be very valuable. So we can tap into the knowledge base of the Cameroon Society of Engineers to help us put together a database of solutions that we can use in order to solve our own local problems. Of course, that did not happen. And a bridge like this bridge should have been rescued. How? Imagine if we had, like, for example, maybe 6 months or every 3 months, these engineers will have to visit these bridges, look underneath. If there are members that are failing, if there are cracks of some nature, especially joints and so on and so forth, if you report to the Cameroon Society of Engineers or through the ministry, we can sit together and put our best brains to see how we can retrofit these bridges. If we discover, for example, which is something I know very well, that even the size of vehicles has changed over the years, if we can determine when that bridge was built, because part of the requirement for you to produce a bridge report, you have to determine when it was built. If you realize that it cannot meet the actual loads of today, or because of some economic improvements, more vehicles go through that bridge, we have to look into the design and retrofit it. And I think that will give value to our own engineers. Instead of always waiting until there is a structure that has failed, and then either people die, and then we start complaining how we're going to fix it. I mean, you saw the lady, the mayor, who came out and said we need 400 million francs CFA. How far are you sure that that number is accurate? Are you just going to replace the superstructure, or you have to go into the foundation design? Is the foundation still in good condition? If it is not in good condition, how are you going to do? Is that structure able to take, can it be retrofitted so it can take a 12-ton load? These are all solutions that can be provided locally. But what has La Republique done? They've contacted the United States company to provide prefabricated bridges. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. But there are lots of things that you have to understand whenever you order things from outside. First of all, you take away the knowledge base that your engineers should have accumulated over time, so they can provide sustainable solutions. And then secondly, you have to understand that when they're prefabricated, it doesn't mean they can fit everywhere. You may come to a situation where maybe the geotechnical conditions are different, and so on and so forth. So you have to bring in, again, another set of foreign expertise in order to do the work. So essentially, we outsource everything. So what is the point of having engineers? They all have to sit in offices? This is terrible. You cannot develop an economy based on outsourcing all the time. And you can see, in fact, when you look at that bridge, to be honest with you, from the time it was designed, I think it was well designed. It was designed for the loads at that time. But nobody knows that, in fact, over time, that bridge has been undergoing much, much higher loads. So if you look at the bridge, the way it failed in a yielding fashion such that it simply bent, and it was still safe for people to, at least people to leave the bridge without being hurt. In some cases, imagine it just broke into 2 pieces and ended in the river bottom. That would have been catastrophic. This is exactly what we don't, as engineers, we don't want that to happen. So this is a classic example of how a poor government can actually lead us into an economy which is almost down in the dumps as we find today. So this is a typical example. And it is very unfortunate that we have a so-called institution that trains engineers, and all the engineers do sit in offices and do absolutely nothing. And this is something that is being repeated throughout 60 years. So the next thing I would like to talk about is the flood. If you have the image of the flood, sorry, the video of the flood, let's talk about it before we can start our discussion, if you have it. Over to you, Rachael. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm listening. I was hoping the technical crew has the flood video already at hand, but I would just want to say there that fellow Amazonians, you see the reasons why Amazonia, the nation we are fighting for, will not rely on outsourcing. Ah, Avenue Kennedy. No, wow. Oh my God.
Okay, so this is a flood, I think, in Yaoundé, if I'm not mistaken. And you can see vehicles are all, sort of submerged. And you can
Yes,
see that, is that the end of it? Okay, so now, so the first thing, if in a good government, you have a situation like this thing has been happening all the time, and nobody's saying anything. In an Amazonian government, what are we going to do in a situation like this? We have to talk to university professors, we have to talk to the Cameroon Society of Engineers, and we have to talk to other prominent engineers to tell us, what do you think we can do? How can we start solving a problem like this? First, consider the flood. Let's say I'm in charge of a problem like this. You need to get accurate information on flood data for that part of the country. You may contact university professors. I hear they do science de l'atmosphère. I believe it's climate science or something of that nature. You ask those people, can you give me some knowledge about how much flood we can get for maybe 50 to 100 years? And we do a plot, we see exactly what is happening, and then we see how we can actually design a drainage system that will be able to address it. I mean, when I was at the Polytechnic, as I told you, I came there and there was this department of civil engineering and civil and environmental engineering. And I had this to my francophone colleagues who were all teaching assainissement. I said, is this not the time for them to show up and tell the government, this is what we can do to get rid of that drainage? If that's the central city, Yaoundé, it is even, I'm telling you, very, very challenging, because from my personal observation, at the city center, most of the electrical conduits are actually buried because you don't have any electric poles there, which means that everything's on the ground. So my question is, are they still active, or how are you going to provide power? These are all major issues that you have to look into. Is there a river close by? And what type of soil is there? Is that some sort of a wetland that they simply ignored? And what type of road are you going to build? You can actually produce a concept drawing or a concept design of what can be done. And then you can consult maybe American or even European engineers to help you build up, as opposed to just going with cap in hand and begging, we have this problem, when you have no clue as to how to solve it. If you have a concept design, you realize that, in fact, we can actually design. We may not have the money to execute, but we can design. You can use ground penetration radar to see whether it's buried infrastructure. There are lots of things that you can do. You can geotechnical and borings to know what is the carrying capacity of that soil. You can do test pits to see if there are any buried infrastructure, how deep are they, and then you can actually make a very clear analysis of what is in there. Before you can sit somewhere and say, I have a problem, at least you solve 40% of that problem. But what do our politicians do today? They do nothing. And even the engineers, they are clueless because they have never been challenged to solve any problem. Never been challenged. University professors, they are all professors because they write articles. They have never been confronted to solve a problem of a national extent. They will talk about climate change, but never would they even try to connect it to environmental design. And this is what France makes sure that they will take care of your education system, because they will make sure that you can never connect the science to your own environment, and thereby depending on them all the time. I was part of the team that solved the flood, the hurricane in New York City. I actually had the team that worked on the service centers. I was able to provide the design. But if I was never challenged, how could I have been able to do it? So this is an environmental hazard. And you see, with floods, with mosquitoes, you have, this is a public health issue as well. So how can we live in a country where people who are capable of doing something, they will never be given the opportunity to do it because they don't come from a particular tribe, they don't speak a certain language, or they are not related to specific people? How are we going to develop? This is why we have to leave these people. I want Ambazonians to understand this problem of the flood. Ambazonia engineers can solve that problem. We can solve it. The problem of the bridge, Ambazonia engineers can solve it. I want everybody to understand this. So this is why we have to be thinking about our future. We have to be fully responsible for our future. Over to you, Rachael.
Yeah, thank you very much, Doctor. I will just, the conversation is getting heated and very interesting. I'm just moved. I just thought of it. This is your expertise, this is your field, and everything. I would just want to say maybe enough of people who may not be able to take care of their home. I'm just touched to ask you. Um, some weeks back, we equally saw pictures on our famous ring road. And I would just want to ask that, viewing that ring road, how would you, as an expert, tell the Amazonian people, as an engineer, the ring road, the Indian road, all those roads that are inaccessible, the Lebialem road, we have connectivities in Amazonia where I think that let the dead cry their dead. What hope or what picture can you paint to the Amazonian people when it comes to your expertise as an
Well,
engineer?
yeah. Well, the first thing I'm going to tell them is that as far as the interim government is concerned, we don't need the ring road. We are going to provide a far more efficient road network that will be able to
Thank you.
access all the counties and LGAs. And the road is totally useless. We don't need it. I think that's the long and short of it. We have a more strategic road network that will be able to link critical economic centers, and will also improve on the export and import capabilities of Amazonia. So in terms of a road, forget about the ring road. Get it off your mind. We don't need it. We don't need ring road, okay? So I don't know if that's enough for you. But the whole essence of design and codes of practice and so on and so forth, we are going to adopt the international code of the international building code. Maybe people have heard about it. I think it's the most advanced, and that's the code of practice that we have to institute in Amazonia. And I think the only other country I know uses it, I think, is Ghana. Ghana uses the international building code, and we are going to expand it to make sure that it extends to our country. And just to tell you about some of the uh, horror stories. I mean, when I was back in La Republique, one of the engineers who at least made me feel that he was a very good engineer, I'm not going to call his name, I once came to his office and I discovered that that was about 1989, 1990, he was still using the British standard of 1954. British standard 1954. That is actually ancient code. And when I asked him, don't you know that the codes of practice have been revived in such a way that we use what we call limit state design, or what the Americans call it load resistance factor design. It was clueless to him. He didn't know what I was talking about. But he prided himself as being one of the best engineers because he had a first class honors from maybe from Furabe College. I mean, I looked at him, I said, how can we, first of all, we don't update ourselves to have the recent codes of practice, and then in order to see what can be done and what are the advantages of having a modern code of practice. So this is a country that just cares less about technology. Again, it is consistent with the French Accord. Leave education to the French, and you are cut off totally from civilization. We have to make our engineers responsible to the government. We have to ask them specific questions about some of the issues that face the government. They have to tell us what needs to be done. They may fail. In some cases, they will fail, but that's not the problem. We learn from those mistakes and move forward. People have built bridges in the Western world and they have failed. Buildings have failed, but they never reject those engineers. They simply ask them, do a root cause analysis, find out what led to it so that you will never repeat that failure again. So they say if you want to eat omelette, you must crack eggs, right? You must. You can't say I'll eat omelette without cracking eggs. That is the future that we have to we are confronted with. So the whole idea about independence is not going to be a bed of roses. We have to shoulder our challenges and we have to look for the best minds, irrespective of where they come from, to help us. Not this situation where if you don't speak a specific language, you cannot do a certain job. And people who have no clue, absolutely no clue in doing things, these are the ones who are given the responsibility to do certain things, which is very, very unfortunate. And that's why the economy is going down the drain. Because everybody, they all know that they came in there through a friend or through a brother or through a relative or through this, not because of their competence. Not because of their competence. And that's what I experienced, when I was teaching at a polytechnic, and this opening came up. And Mr. Jeromota make sure that he took his own countryman and put there, who is a process engineer. I mean, a chemical engineer running a civil engineering department. Of what use is that? Where is the vision? There's no vision. Can you please put on the sound? That one's very important for people to understand. Ma Rachael, please put on the sound.
Modern-day nations from Morocco to the Congo. Under the banner of a civilizing mission, France oversaw brutal occupations that engorged The French Empire was one of the most powerful in human history. At its height, it controlled almost 10% of the world's land area. From Southeast Asia to West Africa, the country we today associate with baguettes and cinema was a dominant global power. And that was particularly true in Africa. France oversaw territory spanning 17 modern-day nations, from Morocco to the Congo. Under the banner of a civilizing mission, France oversaw brutal occupations that engorged the wealth of the empire and left a terrible legacy for ordinary Africans, marked by slavery, extraction, and murder. And today, France's empire in Africa is still around, in a streamlined, more profitable, and even more exploitative form. Let me explain. In the aftermath of the Second World War, there was a wave of decolonial movements sweeping across Africa and Asia. And the French, humiliated by their defeat and occupation at the hands of the Nazis, were eager to maintain their empire. So they responded to revolts in Algeria, Indochina, and Madagascar with brutal reprisals. Maintaining foreign holdings became increasingly difficult. By 1960, France was forced to grant independence to almost all its colonies. But something really important happened in Africa. Basically, the leadership of France decided to keep their empire in Western and Central Africa intact in everything but name. The plan was simple. When an African country gained its independence, it was made to sign a so-called cooperation agreement with France, which would outline the nature of their relations moving forward. In exchange for French foreign aid, African countries were required to give France rights over natural resources, allow France to maintain troops in their territory indefinitely, and, most importantly, keep these countries' currencies linked to France's currency, the franc. Instead of having their own currency, they were to use the franc of the Financial Community of Africa, what is now called the CFA franc. The French framed these cooperation agreements as a choice, but they were also clear about the consequences of defiance. When the leader of Guinea, a socialist named Sékou Touré, rejected the cooperation agreement with France and declared that he preferred to be poor in freedom than rich in slavery, the French government decided to make an example of him. They cut all foreign aid to Guinea and did everything they could to destabilize the government. They launched a secret campaign to print fake Guinean banknotes and flood the country with them. One French spy later bragged, "The operation was a total success. Guinea's economy, already very weak, never fully recovered." The French said that these countries existed within the so-called French community, but the policy would come to be known more widely as France-Afrique. It was about having the former colonies in a position that was maximally advantageous to French interests. Many of the first generation of post-colonial leaders in former French colonies had essentially been installed by the French. They spoke French, had spent time in France, and were well integrated with French elites. Jacques Faucart, a French diplomat, oversaw French relations with Africa for almost 30 years and built a huge web of client relationships with African leaders, using corruption and covert operations to make them loyal subordinates. When local political orders were threatened, the French weren't afraid to protect their hand-picked dictators. Since 1960, France has invaded Africa more than 50 times. Look at the Central African country of Gabon as one example. Gabon is particularly important to France because it has a huge supply of oil and an even bigger supply of uranium. Among the African colonies, Gabon was historically one of the very closest to France. In 1967, a man named Omar Bongo became Gabon's president, soon turning the country into a one-party dictatorship. And Bongo was intimate with France. He had been appointed after flying to Paris for what was basically a job interview with the president. So under Bongo, France and Gabon enjoyed a relationship that benefited both sets of elites. Gabon's oil was pumped by the French state-owned oil company ELF, and its uranium went right into France's arsenal of nuclear weapons. In return, France subsidized Gabon's budget, especially the parts that flowed into the pockets of Omar Bongo and his family. At one point, Bongo was worth over $130 million. Gabon, meanwhile, remained poor and underdeveloped. Under Bongo, it had one of the highest infant mortality rates in the world. Instead of investing in the Gabonese economy, Bongo spent state funds on influencing French politics in his favor, bankrolling the campaigns of several future French presidents. Even today, France keeps troops in the country to support Gabon's current ruler, who happens to be Omar Bongo's son. And somehow, Gabon is actually one of the happier stories. Other countries, like the Central African Republic, are today some of the poorest in the world, in part due to the legacies of French-backed dictators like Jean-Bédel Bokassa. But there's another aspect of French influence that's even more important. Probably the most central part of all is the CFA franc, the last colonial currency still in widespread use. In practice, the countries that use the CFA franc have virtually no monetary sovereignty. The value of their currency is linked to the euro. The poorest countries in the world have a currency controlled by the richest countries. And so the imperatives of European countries, fiscal discipline and fighting inflation, end up shaping the very different world of Western and Central Africa. That leads to an overly tight approach to credit, something that's necessary in our current system for an economy to grow. It means that any appreciation in the euro makes exports from these countries less price competitive. So just look at what happened in Senegal. When the euro appreciated against the dollar from 2000 to 2009, the value of the CFA franc got higher. But this made local Senegalese rice more expensive than imported rice from Thailand. So Senegal, which was trying to build its own domestic rice industry, instead saw Thai rice wipe out local rice farmers. So because domestic products are expensive, this makes export-driven growth nearly impossible, which is necessary to lead a country out of poverty. That's why most countries that use the CFA franc have growth rates significantly lower than their neighbors. Because the CFA discourages the development of domestic industry, many of these economies have actually been shrinking. The Ivory Coast, the largest CFA franc country, has a real GDP per capita 1/3 lower than it had in 1978. Other CFA franc countries like Cameroon and the Republic of the Congo reached their highest levels of real GDP per capita in the 70s and 80s. And because economic growth is weaker, there's more incentive for local elites in these countries, always tied closely to French multinationals, to take as much money out as possible. Billions of dollars have flooded out of these countries and into shell corporations and foreign bank accounts. Through massive corruption, these African elites have joined the ranks of the global super rich. In 2007, for example, Omar Bongo's daughter-in-law appeared on VH1 to buy an LA mansion for $25 million. And elites in France get a great deal too. They enjoy cheap access to natural resources and kickbacks from shady business deals. A French billionaire named Vincent Bolloré now owns most of the major ports across West Africa. In France, Bolloré is known as the, quote, king of Africa. So French colonialism in Africa has never really ended. This is why academics use the term neo-colonialism. Even as the branding of empire has faded away, the structures of economic extraction have only grown stronger. This neo-colonialism is actually a much more efficient form of exploitation than the colonialism of the past. The French no longer pretend to care about building functional governments or improving local living standards. It's pure extraction, all the time. So these African countries are not underdeveloped, they're overexploited. France is almost totally reliant on its influence in Africa for its economic power. In the words of Italy's foreign minister, if France didn't have its African colonies, because that's what they should be called, it would be the 15th largest world economy. Instead, it's among the first, exactly because of what it's doing in Africa. And the French know this. Francois Mitterrand, former president of France, said it himself. Without Africa, he declared, France will have no history in the 21st century. Today, of course, France faces competition from China within Africa, and new challenges to the colonial symbolism of the CFA franc. There are plans to change the currency's name and abandon the most overt symbols of the colonial past to make it look like the system is more African than French. But France has no intention of actually abandoning a system of extraction that has made it one of the richest nations on Earth. The real question is whether the next generation of Africans will allow it to continue.
Thank you. So, this is a very good clip for Ambazonians to see exactly what is happening to us as a result of French action in Africa. And it is our responsibility, our generation, to make sure that this continuing exploitation doesn't happen. And I want Ambazonians to understand this. You can imagine that a currency, and you have no power to regulate the amount of currency in the economy or the amount of money in the economy. And what does that lead to? When you have an economy where there is no manufacturing base, if you devalue the economy, it will even make the situation much worse because there's nothing for you to sell out, nothing that you can pride yourself to say, we manufacture this thing locally. Now that the price is cheap, people from outside will buy. Nothing. It makes our raw materials even cheaper for the colonizer to exploit.
To buy.
So we have to understand this. If we don't take over our economy, so we can regulate it in such a way that we can encourage investments from outside, so that we can make sure that we identify the areas where we are strong and to put in value-added criteria, there is no way that we can ever develop. We will only be selling bananas and pears and guavas, and that will lead us nowhere. Okay? So I want Ambazonians to understand this very well. Okay? To grow an economy, you need 4 factors. You need the consumer spending, you need investment, you need government spending, and you need net imports, net exports. Net exports only come in when the other factors of production are internal. Otherwise, if they are external, there's no way that you can be able to have exports. So that's one important piece of information that we have to understand. When you see foreign companies dumping materials or products in our economy, it's because they manufacture them locally. So they've been able to expand on their economies, and the net result is that they take all that produce and they dump it in our own markets. And some of them may dump them at a price lower than what they were they manufactured, the cost of manufacture. But it doesn't matter because they have fueled other subsidiary industry with the money that has been injected into that economy. That's one thing that we fail to understand. And that's why we see a lot of products from all over the world being dumped into Africa. And some of them, they may even give them for free because they have already met the target of making sure that that money was injected into the local manufacturing base. They manufactured the products, and the net result was to send them overseas. So we have to understand that until we build our own manufacturing base, there's no way that our economies can get off the soil. So this is something that we have to understand, and we continue in the spiral of trade whereby France comes in and takes our export, and the worst part of it is that they keep 50% of the market price. So when tell me 2035, can Mr. Biya come on television and explain how the economy is going to revive or is going to take off by 2035? Can he give us step by step? One, this is going to happen. Two, this is going to happen. And we're already so indebted. How can you emerge economically when you're already so indebted? To a tune of, I think each person now owes about 800,000 francs CFA. Everybody, woman, man, child, old, I mean, some of the unborn. How are you going to emerge? This is a big lie, absolute big lie, a big lie. And Cameroonians being what they are gullible. They cannot ask questions because if they do, they'll be killed. Especially if you're a prominent economist. Of course, France will send agents behind you to kill you. That's what they've always done. And let Ambazonians understand this. This war that we're fighting is not an easy one. People will be sent to destroy you simply because you have ideas that they don't like. You have Ambazonians who know exactly what is going wrong. But for a fistful of CFA francs, they are ready to kill their brothers. So let's be on the watch out. Let's be on the watch out. This fight is not going to be easy. Let nobody tell you that it's going to be a walk in the park. It's not going to be. But we are on the right path to freedom. We are on the right path to freedom. And I want every Ambazonian to understand this. We should be able to solve our problems, fundamental problems. In one of the WikiLeaks reports, there was a comment made, I think, by USAID about what they expect Cameroonian ministers to be. I think I cannot, let me just paraphrase it. They thought, and I believe they were referring to the Minister of Mines and Power. I don't know who the fellow is. I don't remember his name. At one time, I think it was English speaking, Anglophone, I think of Bamileke origin. He said they expect ministers to be project managers. Project managers in the sense that when you have a project and you put together your project team, if there are team members that are lacking, that is where you ask the Americans to help you. If you want to build, let's say, a bridge, and you don't have an expert in geotechnics, well, the Americans will be able to give you a geotechnical engineer. That is the sort of approach that the Americans expect ministers to behave. They should be project managers. They should know exactly what they need.
Yeah.
They should know. So when you come to the Americans, you come with a very clear request. Not coming empty-handed, not even know exactly what the problem is. And that's what these ministers are. They have no clue on anything. And that's a problem. And I told you last time that neither Biya nor any of his ministers are project managers. They're just managers. Just managers. Just dealing with people. They have, and of course, their own way of dealing with people is always very tribal. They look for relatives or tribesmen or something. If your tribesman happens to have some basic education, oh, he's the best in the world. We have to stay away from this. In West Cameroon days, we had Bamilekes who occupied prominent positions in government because they were knowledgeable to help the government or help society. That's why they were able to grow, and today the same offspring of these people, they are the people fighting against us. The same people who were brought in government
Doctor,
by virtue of their excellence, by virtue of their knowledge. We didn't
let
hire
me,
people because they were friends or relatives.
Doctor, really, that was a talk I really like you to take because I intended discussing this idea on the horizon. But when I was discussing with Paddy said it would be good that you also share this with Dr. Mungwa. You have just hit the nail on the head. My take was that who is an Anglophone and who is an Ambazonian? Because you just nailed it there that we had Anglophones, Bamilekes, who occupied positions not because, we know that twist that is there, that cliche that is there. Some people go out there sound and speaking English, and some of us say that they occupy the positions where Ambazonians would have been sitting and doing what is right. Who are these two groups of people? So that we
Okay,
should know
let me
why
make
we
it very
should be
clear.
fighting
Yes,
out. Yeah.
right. An Anglophone is not necessarily an Ambazonian. Listen to this. An Anglophone is not necessarily an Ambazonian. An Ambazonian is somebody who has the Anglo-Saxon culture that recognizes democracy, recognizes the rights of fellow citizens. It's essentially an Ambazonian, from the right definition of it, and probably even going to the description of democracy by the Greek, is what they call a citizen. You have to have that knowledge of citizenship, that you are a citizen and you are there to serve communities. That's what we're brought up with. That's the idea that we had. And that's why we had community development. People were citizens to make sure that they serve their communities. But when you have a francophone who migrated to Ambazonia and could speak in English, but without that cultural part of him, he's not an Ambazonian. And that's the mistake that they've been saying. In fact, La Republique understood it and said there's no Anglophone problem. Yes, there's no Anglophone problem. There is an Ambazonian problem. We Ambazonians, our cradle is the CDC. That's where there is no Ambazonian who doesn't have a parent or a relative or knows somebody who works in the CDC. I keep on saying this. And that's where that culture was nurtured. The respect for a fellow human being, understanding the responsibility to serve our communities. And this all came all the way even from Enugu when we left the house of Enugu and came back to Boya. These are the elements that we have. When I was in primary one, I remember we had pipe-borne water, and it was provided by the community. Roads, communities had to contribute for roads. We knew the importance, and nobody would say, I'm not going to do my part. If we had to clear a certain portion of road, nobody would say, I'm not going to do it. It was your responsibility because you used that road. The idea of a citizen. But you may have Anglophones who are either idiots. Idiots means that he only thinks about himself, always himself, no matter what is my own in it. Or tribalists who only think that it's only my own person. If I have to have a body, it can only be my brother. Look at Biya. He's a typical description of a tribalist. And his ministers are all their typical description of idiots. That's what La Republique is. Prove me wrong. Wherever they go, they either behave as idiots or they behave as tribalists. And the head of that tribal gang, you have Biya. And that's why the French want to model every African leader to be either an idiot or a tribalist. You can see Biya is not sure. He wants that his son should take over. This is somebody who's a drug peddler. He was known to buy and sell drugs. These are not the type of people to be able to be responsible for our destiny. We want citizens, and that's what we've always been. Over to you.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Mungwa. This takes me again to the point where, in the course of your discussion or presentation, you said no law suggests that people must accept subjugation. Are you in any way advising Amazonians not to let themselves be subjugated, and at the same time exposing how Cameroon has put people in bondage through the colonial pact that they signed? Now that you have the platform, how could you balance these two so that Amazonians will know what they are doing and how desperately should they be doing what they have to do?
I mean, there's nothing for me to say. I mean, it's a matter of we, not we Amazonians. That's why we are fighting. We are simply saying no to subjugation. It's that simple. That's what I
Yeah.
said. It is our right to fight back, and we are fighting back very well, very strongly. That's what
Yes.
subjugation is. They want to, bring us under total control and dictate what they want us to do, dictate everything that we have to do so that we take orders. We've just said no, and that's why we're
Our
sitting on this
school
platform and talking
system,
about.
our law courts, our economy, their currency on us, all these finger countings. I just
It,
want
it,
you to reiterate them, Doc, because we can
yeah,
be talking. Some people came in late, some people may not really have caught it from the first glimpse. Emotions are high, people are watching, they are thinking, I just, yeah,
Yeah,
a kind
subjugation
of,
is. I mean, I don't want to feel that Ambazonians. I'm sure they're educated enough to understand
just go
what
ahead, Doc,
subjugation
go
is, but
ahead,
it's
just
but we
try to
can
break it, twist
subjugation.
it the way.
Our law courts, yes, our educational systems, teaching in a language that we don't understand, and that's why the quality of speaking in English has gone down the drain over the years, to a point where
Yeah,
some people can neither speak in English or in French because they don't have the ability to capture the words to express themselves. When I talk to you about communication and leadership and so on, there's no way you can have our own leaders who can communicate. Now we are bound to, and it's even a good idea that we use the lingua franca, but we cannot do everything. When we have to talk at the international milieu. At
yeah,
times, it's better if you can speak at least the administrative language well, as we've seen in other African countries and other parts of the
yeah.
world. So essentially, what we are saying here is that we cannot accept that our system, our legal system, which is in fact is the common law, where you are uh, uh, you are what's the terminology in the French system, you are guilty until found innocent. In the common law, you are innocent until found guilty. So which the burden of proof is the person who is accusing you. So you have to provide sufficient evidence to demonstrate that that person is guilty. But can you imagine in a corrupt country like La Republique, imagine that just by taking you to court you're already guilty? Can you imagine the
Mm-hmm.
consequence? And that's exactly what is happening. They take people, they accuse them, and then they just probably kill them, and they just send them to jail. And there's no opportunity, especially for the poor. How can they defend themselves? But if we go by the common law system, where you are innocent until proven guilty, so the burden of proof is on the accuser, and that brings perfect justice, such that even if you are not that wealthy, at least you will have an opportunity to be able to prove, if they cannot prove that to beyond reasonable doubt, that you've committed a crime or done something that is against the laws of society, then you're a free man. You're a free man. That's very important. And especially the legal aspect of it. We have two, the legal aspect and the educational system. We cannot, the moment they take the two, then we are like an orphan. We're totally like orphans. And I can see that a lot of us are already orphans in La Republique, because you don't know, you can identify yourself with anything that you were accustomed to. So this is what we are talking about. We have to restore. We have to restore these cultures. We must restore our educational system, and we must restore our legal system. And of course, the economy is the paramount of it. We have to make sure that whatever we sell, we collect the dues for that sale. We cannot sell and take just half the amount. That is not acceptable. And when you have situations like this, like the flood, we want to have engineers who can present the design basis. They should be able to define what the design basis is. What are we doing to eradicate this problem? Many engineers will not know how to define the design basis. And it can be very simple, but we don't know. And then you go for aid, and they bring people who are even far less experienced than some of the engineers we have back home, for the simple reason that they have an opportunity to do something. They come and learn from our own projects, and they go back home and they send them back as experts. This is totally unacceptable. We should be able to do our thing, make errors, correct ourselves, and do better in the future. So one thing Ambazonians have to understand: to be an effective professional, you don't need a PhD degree. You probably do not even need a master's degree. But what you need, minimum qualification plus opportunity. Opportunity to practice. Opportunity to practice with those who are far more experienced. Opportunity to take control of projects or whatever assignments are given to you, so that you can go into the trenches and try and do something. And if you can't do it, you ask people who can do it, and you work together, and later on, you become the master of your trade. And that has actually been the history of Ambazonia. In the British system, we value experience, whether they were mechanics, whether they were electricians. Experience was very, very important. And this is what we lack. We have people with multiple degrees, PhDs, who have never practiced. And they go around with their diplomas in their chest pocket to tell them, oh, I graduated from Cambridge. Oh, I graduated from Oxford. Oh, I graduated from here. But over the years, they've done absolutely nothing. Nothing to show for. I'd rather have somebody who graduated from a technical college in Queen, KTC, and worked with me for about 10, 15 years than getting somebody who graduated from the Polytechnic and has never seen a shovel before. That's absolutely useless. No use to me. Over to you.
Well said, Doc. We have just few minutes to say last words. I would just want to say this to Amazonians, that we are so blessed. We are so blessed with people, our fellow brothers, bona fide. I use the word bona fide Amazonian, not just he or she that has a birth certificate from Southern Cameroon's Amazonia, but he that the great grandmother, the father was inculcated, was cultured, was nurtured, and was born and bred, was brought up in that substance that was culturally based. For those people who grew, I used to see it in my elder brothers and sisters, cousins, those who were born in the 60s, some in the 50s, in the 60s, some of us from the 70s. We managed to see we saw some of the last good days. That is why we are crying, fighting. Ambazonians, don't let that goodness in you, that good thing that has been stolen and buried.
I want
Even
to
the
stress
standard
one thing here.
in those
I want to
days.
stress one thing. One of the things that is really killing Ambazonians, and in fact, that is what La Republique is perpetuating, is what we call personality politics, politics of personalities. You heard it say Frankist. Frankist.
Yeah.
The politics of Frank beer. That is very dangerous. And you see that among Ambazonians where instead of identifying somebody who can carry you to the promised land, they identify, oh, I have to like Dr. Sako. Why do you have to like him? Why do you don't have to like him? What we should be looking at is this person able to carry this war to its into its conclusion? Personality politics. And we suffered from that personality politics in the 60s. And that's what part of it that led to us getting to where we are today. Whereas Yemen Endele
Right.
actually understood the challenges and the frustration getting into La Republique. Foncha had a different way to look at it. And people were attributing more to his personality, small of his sick. Remember, they used to say that about him. We
Yeah.
should have been identifying what are the advantages. And you see that being perpetrated today. While people go out and say, oh, I don't like Dr. Sako. If Dr. Sako can only accept that they should do an election based on what? Where is it shown in the Constitution?
Mm-hmm.
Or if I want to if Paul Tasson talks to me because I'm from LBLM, Chris Ano, yes, I'll accept because he's from LBLM, I'm from LBLM, therefore it's okay.
Mm.
This identity
Frankism.
politics should be, we have to be very careful. And I want to make it very clear, this identity politics. And La Republique is actually pushing this throughout. Who is Frankist? Who is he? Or the Lion Man? That is very dangerous, extremely dangerous. We have chosen Dr. Sako because he has the skill set to deal with the internal and external issues affecting our liberation movement. He has the trust of the international community, and he has the trust and the mandate from the Amazonian people. That is sufficient. I don't care whether Dr. Sako is a Bakweri, he's a whatever he is. I don't care. And you shouldn't either. So let Ambazonians start thinking. They should rethink their position. Are you suffering from the syndrome of identity politics? Or you want somebody who has the capability to take us out of this mess? This is what I want to leave Ambazonian with. Get away from this gutter politics of identity politics that it is being spearheaded by La Republique. When next you hear Frankies and so on, you let them know that you understand what it's all about. Sorry. So over to you.
Thank you very much, SOS. You are not just an icon, really, a blessing to the Amazonians. Listening to you every Tuesday has been a blessing of its kind. You coming in as our communication secretary has been marvelous, has just been a gift to the Amazonian people, full of knowledge and impartment. And for me to be the one to take you up today in on Friday, maybe I will start praying that Tuesday there should be technical problems. Maybe I should start praying that there should be technical problems on Tuesdays. So from time to time you can come and visit us and let me have this honor to talk with you at the same time learning and being the one to meet the Amazonian people alongside with you and President Sako. You have just nailed it out there. Ah, God. I would just encourage people to keep attending town halls. If you hear that there is a town hall, please attend. Do attend because there's a lot to learn there. This knowledge where Dr. Mungwa just described Dr. Sako as a square peg in a square hole. Really, everyone should come and tap from there. You will be encouraged, you will be motivated in whatever thing that you are doing to bring Amazonia. You will do it double, you will do it quadruple. You will just do it as if you are the only one left to do anything for Amazonia. It is really, I don't know if Doctor is still there to come up and give his final word. If not, I will just say a very big thank you for everyone that sat out extra to listen to this the liberation state of the liberation movement. Look at a country, look at the one dra- no drainage system. I am not an engineer, but everybody will know that good drainage system will not let a whole capital city. I saw it Avenue Kennedy. It will just be inundated. It will just go in a. What was that over the years? My brother and sister, that's not what we are bargaining for Amazonia. And it is not a kind of law systems where you will be guilty, put endlessly in prison without any court cases, no judgment and everything. And you are not even given the opportunity to even prove yourself not guilty, because the terrorism that is even there, no one has the guts to stand up. No lawyer will come and just to say they want to stand by your side to be your lawyer. Look at the cases our brothers and sisters are perishing in Kondengi Central Prison, in Douala New Bell Prison, in Boya Prison, in Bamenda Prison, in Bafoussam Prison, in Kongsamba Prison, because their law stiff, their nonsense colonial pact laws with France is the one that is ruling the whole place. Our people have been subjugated to despicable conditions. Even when they are sick, they are being handcuffed and led to the hospital and they die there. And we keep crying every day. I wonder, when is the international community going to review this by joining whatsoever that they they have left us in perpetual bondage. So we are just pleading that every Amazonian should stand up, because Anglophones will not stand up for you. They're Anglo Basas, they're Anglo Ewondos, they're Anglos Bami, they're the people of the 11th province. They will not stand up for you. They will not. It's you that say, I be man command, I be Ngemba man, I be Bui man, I be this. You know, I be Bakuri man, I be Bakosi man, I be Basosi man, I be Bayangi man. You know your roots. You know your roots. You are able to say, I be this person. But the others will say, they will call where they come from. And if you look at it very well, even the skulls of their grandfathers are not where we are calling. They took them where they know that they belong to. And those criteria will be coming up when the sociologists will start viewing laws and aspects in Amazonia. It is not a threat, but it's just a human right for people to classify themselves, to know where I belong and where I came from. You see, even Americans, they are doing their DNA to know where they come from Africa. It's not a crime. Do your DNA and trace where you come from, and don't create a nuisance where they have given you space, and don't become an enemy to the people who said, "Come will chop small," and you came, you are eating, and you want them to die so you can take over. God in heaven will not let that with the Amazonian people. So, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Amazonians, that was the state of the liberation movement, our quest for sovereignty with Dr. Mungwa, our able Secretary of State. I will just um, wish everyone a good afternoon, a good morning, a good evening, a good night. And wherever you've been watching, please just keep in touch. The struggle continues. We are doing what we are supposed to be doing as Amazonians. Do not relent your efforts. Keep drafting. Keep drafting. according to your blessings. Do not relent. It is the only way we can fuel and keep our car, the engine intact, so that no infection, no knockdowns, and no disappointments will be on our way. Our liberation movement is intact. Do your best, I do my part. At the end of the day, our testimonies will be blessed. Thank you.
You're watching the People's Television, ABC Amber TV, the voice of Ambazonia. Stay tuned. You're watching the People's Television, ABC Amber TV, the voice of Ambazonia. Stay tuned.
Hello, Ambazonians. Before I give my final remark for tonight, I just wanted to bring up one very important issue here. You all remember that during the past couple of days, the act came together. I think was the Bo Herbert and Cho Ayaba and others came, and they were talking about how they agree, they support the sweep-led process. However, they don't want to work with Dr. Sako. All I wanted to say here is that this is a typical example of personality politics. I think the question that we should all ask Cho Ayaba and Bo Herbert is, why is it an issue to work? Why do you have an issue to working with Dr. Sako? This is somebody who has been recognized, who put together the act or team act, who was able to work out this negotiation with the Swiss, and now being supported by all international organizations, and yet you feel that you cannot work with them. I think you have to reconsider your positions to know that without Dr. Sako in your midst, there's no way you can go ahead with the so-called act that you formed. So I wanted to make this very clear. And fellow Ambazonians, and again, this is another week where we talked about very important issues that have happened in the history of Ambazonia. We talked about the Banjul disgrace, whereby we're able to defend our position that we are a people and we are not a detachment or an attachment to the Bamlikes or the Basas. And we have the right to self-determination. We should never accept subjugation, and we are on our path to self-determination and sovereignty. So good night, and I look forward to talking to you again, or we look forward to talking to you again next week, Tuesday. Over to you, and goodbye.
is unfortunate. So we are remembering that sad situation. And I want to apologize to everyone who's watching us right now on Facebook. We really deeply apologize for starting this program a little bit beyond